Thank you, Chairman Shelby, and thank you, Vice Chair Mikulski, and thank you so much, Attorney General Lynch, for your leadership at the Department of Justice and for appearing before the Appropriations Committee again. I was encouraged in your testimony earlier that you want to focus on the smart and effective enforcement of our existing gun laws. And I think the budgetary proposals that you've laid out and the elements of the executive order that you've covered are strong and good attempts to do exactly that. I was pleased to hear you as the nation's top law enforcement official, review what you believe to be the well-settled constitutionality of the actions proposed in the executive order and the actions proposed in the budget. So rather than debating that further, I'm going to move forward to what you view as the most valuable parts of the budget request, something where this committee will be taking action. A portion of the President's announcement was the addition of 200 new ATF and 230 new FBI personnel. As we've discussed, I have seen tragically firsthand in my hometown of Wilmington what a dramatic spike in gun violence can do to disrupt a town and a community, to wreak destruction and pain and loss on families and whole neighborhoods. And I am grateful for how the Department of Justice, through its Violence Reduction Network, has provided additional resources. But I've also seen how access to better quality background checks, access to better quality ballistic information, and an increased federal law enforcement presence can make a significant difference. Can you explain in a little more detail why these new ATF agents and new FBI personnel, these new examiners and investigators are really necessary, and how they can help reduce gun violence, not just in my hometown, but in rural areas and in urban areas all over this country?
Yes, thank you, Senator. With respect to our request, particularly for increased resources for ATF, we have discussed requesting resources that would allow us to hire 200 new agents and investigators. Some of those would, of course, work on the increased paperwork resulting from background checks, but the agents in particular will be focusing on the violent crime problems that we find to be so troubling in so many of our cities and towns and neighborhoods. They will be working in conjunction with task forces of state and local officers, because we found those to be extremely effective ways at focusing on the hot spots in particular areas. It would allow us also to increase the amount of enforcement that we provide over the internet sales, as I mentioned, but to really focus on the violent crime problems plaguing so many of our cities. In addition to the agents that we are requesting, the resources that we are requesting and would begin using this year would also go towards strengthening what's called the NIBIN network, the Ballistics Initiative. This is a law enforcement to law enforcement initiative that essentially traces guns found at crime scenes as well as casings, essentially all firearms-related evidence, and shares that information on a nationwide basis with law enforcement entities. It allows us to make connections. It allows us to find connections between firearms, between those who are using the firearms. We are, in fact, opening a national center for NIBIN analysis, which will be located in Huntsville, Alabama. It's due to open, I believe, in a few months. And this is a tool that our law enforcement agencies depend upon greatly. The ability to track firearms is of grave importance. In particular, as I mentioned, the ability to track stolen firearms is one that we feel can protect our communities. Stolen firearms, and even indeed those who are lost, those firearms that are lost, do not end up in the hands of law-abiding Americans. They end up in the hands of criminals, and they are recovered during criminal investigations. Sadly, they are recovered at the rate that we are seeing them, 1,300 a year on average over the last 5 years, once the crime has already been committed. One of the things that these regulations would do is allow us to begin those investigations earlier and hopefully intercept those shipments before they fall into the hands of criminals.
Let me, just in closing, thank you for the very good work that your team has been doing in partnership with the Wilmington Police Department. John Skinner, who's the lead in the Office of Justice Programs, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, has done a great job. I've gotten to see firsthand how better access to NIBIN, better access to ballistics tools has improved our homicide case clearance rate in Wilmington from 10% 2 years ago to 50% this year. That makes a real difference. And having access to world-class and timely analysis and insight of ballistics evidence has significantly improved the investigatory and prosecutorial outcomes in my hometown. I am excited about this work. It is my hope that on a bipartisan basis, we can invest the resources to strengthen federal law enforcement, to tackle gun violence around our country. As was said by Senator Mikulski in the opening, it is a crime, a shame, that Americans literally in their going to church to worship, going to see movies, going to college classrooms, going to elementary school, have been victims of gun violence, and we must do more together to tackle this very real problem facing our nation. Thank you, Madam Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Senator.
Senator